Hello and welcome to episode 220 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined with my co-host Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we have not so much to talk about. We do have some things, including some potential new maps that could be coming to the CDL, hopefully sooner rather than later. We also had a joking CDL roster mania announcement, which is not every day that you get one of those. And then I think the most important thing is that we talk about the fifth week of the Major 2 qualifiers. And I feel like this is probably the first week where the playoff chances or just the odds that teams get to Major 2, I feel like that's the first week that a lot of people will actually be paying attention to it, because to this point, we were just past the halfway mark. Now we're getting into the final few weeks of matches, and it's really becoming important and even more clear who is going to make it to Major 2 and who is possibly not going to make it to Major 2. But before we get to any of that, how are you doing, Bink?
Yep, doing all right. Like you said, not expecting this to be a long episode, but every time I've said that in recent months, it turns out to be a usual length episode because we go on some rant or something. So fully expecting this one to follow a similar pattern. But yeah, not a ton to talk about. Should be a good episode though before the second to last weekend of Major 2 qualifiers.
I think we start off with the Kenny news, if you want to call it that, I guess. It was C9, the C9 New York Twitter account, posting a graphic in a tweet. The graphic said, "Welcome to C9 NY, Kenny," and the tweet said, "Our end of the deal is done," with the shaking hands emoji. And this was in relation to the CDL highlight Twitter account. I don't know how familiar you are. I have seen a few things. I believe I have this account muted on Twitter, if I'm not mistaken, because it did not pop up for me as to what they were actually quote tweeting at the time. But they're quote tweeting a tweet by CDL highlight at CDL Drama Central that said, "I'll permanently delete my Twitter account if you end up back on a CDL team. You'll never be back in the league, you bum," at Quavo, adding Kenny. And so, C9 did their part. They quote unquote signed Kenny, hopefully to get CDL highlight out of the COD Twitter space. I think this is a good use of Twitter, I would say. What did you think of it?
I mean, dude, the post got 1.5 million views on it. I kind of want to go back, and I was doing this before we started, and I got sidetracked. And when would these matches have started? I mean, it's got to be like early February. I'm gonna go back and try and look to see what the views on the tweet for their roster announcement would be, because even that was kind of like, memed. Oh, here we go. Forged under pressure, ready to shine under the bright lights. No, that's got 1.3 million views too. I mean, shit. Maybe we've been, you know, I don't think we've been downplaying the impact that C9 as an organization could have in the CDL. I think we've more or less been disappointed in the results so far. But I mean, those, I know it's just Twitter views, but those are two tweets over 1 million impressions is definitely not something you can ignore.
Yeah, I mean, you could ignore C9 just in general, but maybe not the Twitter account. I think it's just like the broader thing is that there's a lot of toxicity on Twitter, especially from this account. Although I will say that I'd say like maybe 25% of COD Twitter is like the worst people that you would ever meet in life. Those people are kind of trolling the replies. But yeah, this is someone that needs to go. The CDL highlight thing, like, I mean, the CDL hater stuff also, I think, is just really whack and lame, and that stuff doesn't really resonate with me.
I think if you make it very clear early on, I don't know, I couldn't tell you the last time I saw a CDL hater post, but as long as you make it like clear that it's a parody account, like I don't have a huge issue with it. I think it's when people try to play like both sides of it, where it's like they're posting actual serious clips and then they're trying to post clips and maybe misconstrue what's being said or what's happening to fit their narrative. That's where it crosses the line for me. I think the CDL hater stuff, like I remember there was like one tweet about like Standy that I remember where he had like a bad series or whatever, and they tweeted the picture of him with like his jersey sleeves rolled up, and obviously Standy isn't like the most muscular thing, and I was like, okay, that's like in good fun, like that's like, it obviously if you're a big Standy guy or Standy yourself, you're not going to be a fan of that tweet, but it's like, the guy had a rough series, and then they post something like that, like kind of making a little fun of his uh, arm definition or however you want to phrase it. I think like stuff like that, I don't got a problem with. And obviously, you and I both have like we both like the trash talk, but especially when the Draza and Scrap stuff went to that next step during that whole debacle, we were both like, okay, this is kind of like going beyond just in-game trash talk, and
Mhm.
I think that's the same thing with like this Twitter stuff is like, I'm cool with light-hearted banter, I'm cool with the in-game trash talk and stuff, but once it gets like a little more personal or elevated to another level, then I think we got to pump the brakes a little bit and evaluate what's going on.
JJ Wody in the YouTube chat said only okay if you show your face and troll. The behind the screen hating and hiding is absurd. I would agree with that. There's like a
Yeah,
level of like you uh especially with pro players, like they don't really know who's criticizing them. They just see some kind of probably like anime Twitter profile photo, and then just see like a bunch of really dumb shit that um they obviously don't have to take into account, but they certainly don't need to see just in general. I think when I'm talking about that, I think about we're witnessing a breakdown tweet from Minnesota, I believe it was, the Minnesota Rocker at the time Twitter account, when they 1v3'd OpTic, and Scump kind of crashed out and was like, this isn't okay or whatever. I think that stuff, I do think some of the Twitter account stuff from esports teams is a little on the line, because it's like they're a little too comfortable, a little too unprofessional. But I think in certain cases like that, where it's kind of like hyping up your team or your win, I feel like it's not that big of an issue. I thought it was mostly just Scump was upset just in general,
of
and he
course.
he
Yeah.
just decided to kind of whine about it, which you kind of just take, that's part of life, I guess. But I think with stuff like the CDL hater thing, which I think I might have that account muted at this point too, and like I have
I could see that.
all those parody and like hate accounts, like NBA, the Centel NBA Centel accounts. Like I do not care one bit about seeing those things. Like I don't think a lot of them are funny. I feel like it's almost like an SNL episode where it's like just trying to get one thing over the line, just trying to get something to get one blow up tweet, and typically I would say they don't achieve that. Especially this hater, the not the hater, the CDO highlight one is very weird. Some very just odd tweets. It seems like the person that runs it is like 15 years old, which would make a lot of sense. And hopefully they don't grow up to be the same way as they are acting right now.
One thing I will say, I can't remember if you were a big Game of Thrones guy or not. I don't
No,
think you were
I've
back
never seen an
when we
episode.
were. Okay, but there have been some accounts going around in a similar vein to like NBA Centel and that stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
they're calling it Westeros Central.
Oh,
And there
I've
was
seen
like
it.
there's like one that it was like making fun of, well, not making fun of, but it was like mocking Gino going back to the Jets in terms of like Game of Thrones language and comparing it to that. And I saw another one that's doing it like CDL Westeros doing it like Game of Thrones related memes with COD stuff, and it was like the formal apologizing to censor
Oh
for
yeah.
the seven meme going viral or whatever. It's like that stuff I think is funny. So I I I guess they're like we were saying. There's a line that if you're below that line, you're good in my eyes at least. But I think some of these instances, it definitely crosses that, and that's when it gets brought up a bit more.
I do love that when Formal apologized to him, it really wasn't about like him actually saying it. It was just that it blew up afterwards. Because he said like I didn't know that it go crazy like that. And it's like not that he said it, that it was like really disrespectful, but funny, but like that it became something that has now been attached to censor for literally the rest of his career.
Oh yeah.
But 7 is great number. So I don't know how to segue out of this into like a more CDL topic, but I think we should talk about JP, what he said about OpTic, and how they are going to be testing the maps for the rest of the Major 2 qualifiers. He said Den and Blackheart are going to be in every series from now on for us, which is a great thing to talk about, considering on our last episode we talked about Blackheart specifically for them, how that was the first time that I think when they played Carolina, that was the first time that they had played Blackheart Hardpoint this season. They barely lost it, so a pretty good performance considering having no actual match experience with the map. But now we have a few weeks of OpTic apparently going to try to play on these other maps, and I think as a result we might not see an undefeated OpTic season, at least, or OpTic Major 2 qualifiers, because they're 8-0. They have 3 matches to go. They'll probably win at least one or maybe multiple of those matches, but when you're playing on maps that you're not as comfortable with, as we've seen with Atlanta FaZe over the years, that can come back to bite you and can lead to some losses. How do you kind of react to this news, and especially JP coming out and saying it rather than just us seeing, oh man, they're actually playing Blackheart again?
That's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, we've speculated in the past over FaZe in particular in multiple instances in multiple past few seasons. Like when they're doing it, it feels obvious, but we've never gotten direct communication from like Crowder or somebody that they're actually doing that, unless it's like in a post-event vlog or something of that sort. We've never gotten like a tweet similar to this, and obviously this isn't from JP himself, but it's a clip from his stream posted on Twitter. But I just think it makes a ton of sense for OpTic given their position, although it would be cool for them to go 11-0 in these qualifiers after going 0-18 in the qualifiers. Obviously, that's series versus map count there, but like, what a complete 360 from Major 2 last year to Major 2 this year. As cool as that would be, I think testing out these maps, given this opportunity, is important and should set them up for future success this year, as long as these maps aren't like rotated out or anything like that. And I think because we have this clip and this knowledge now beforehand, it just makes it much easier for us on the podcast over these next 2 weeks, because if we didn't have this and OpTic were to lose a match to one of these next 2 teams, we would have been sitting here like, what the hell is going on with OpTic? How did this happen? Yada yada yada. And now we know for a fact like they are going into these last couple matches with the mindset that they want to try some stuff out. I think they have been afforded that opportunity to do so given their 8-0 start, and they're capitalizing on the opportunity in front of them, and they are like basically locked into a winner's bracket spot at Major 2 already. So there really is, and we talked about it last episode too, like they would have to go 0-3, and actually no, that didn't even matter because they're 4 games up. So I'm pretty sure they're officially locked into the 1 seed too. So they literally have nothing to lose other than potentially 30 CDL points. And that's if they lose the entire series, which, given how strong Optiviv looked versus not in comparison to almost every other team in recent weeks, I think they can be pretty confident that they'll win regardless of testing maps.
Yeah, this is pretty rare to actually not only have a team come out and say something like this, but for a team to be even in a similar position, and like they technically they could not get the 1 seed because the 4-3 teams, they have 4 matches to play, so
Okay,
they could
gotcha.
all finish 8-3 technically. So like OpTic would literally have to lose every one of their matches. Those teams, whatever, they'd have to win all 4 of their matches. I don't know how many of them, like LAT, Falcons, Miami, Minnesota, those teams technically could go 8-3. I don't know how many of them play each other over the next few weeks. So yeah, they're obviously they're I would say like a 95% chance of making it being the number 1 seed, regardless of whether they're testing out any maps or not. But it does show how wide the disparity is between the teams in these major 2 qualifiers, that OpTic feels, rightly so, that they can like kind of take their foot off the gas pedal, and it's like, all right, let's try some things, let's experiment in these very official matches, while the rest of the league, like literally every other team in the league, is fighting to get to major 2, which I think is just very odd. And I can't remember ever having a similar situation. There have been times where the number 1 team has been awesome and undefeated, and uh, kind of steamrolled through. But even going into last week, usually we expect there to be some kind of drama in that top seed, and that's just not the case with OpTic, and they're taking advantage of it as they should. I think it's a good thing to think about in terms of the maps too, because Season 2 Reloaded comes out today on Wednesday. There are 5 new maps, including Clifftown, which is a Yemen remake, which I saw some discourse around that. Grind, Firing Range. So they're bringing back some older maps. And now you have a new zombies map as well, Nuketown, which I don't know how you feel about that, but I think just first of all, what likelihood do you think there is of getting Yemen or Clifftown, I guess in this case, back into the CDL? It was a competitive map in the early part of Black Ops 2. It got phased out toward the end. It's been a really long time. It has not been remade before this, so we don't have an opportunity to kind of see what the maps would look like in BO4 or BO6 or whatever. So how do you feel about the possibility of Yemen coming into the competitive map pool?
Well, before I do that, what was the discourse you saw around Yemen? Because I didn't see anything.
Oh, people are just kind of this is more general Call of Duty stuff, but people were trying to say that they changed the name and all of that because
Yeah.
of the war in Iran. So
Oh, okay.
and the war in
Well, that was
Yemen.
one thing. That was one thing I was going to bring up, just in a sense, and that I thought it was interesting that they are changing the name of it, because there have been a lot of other maps that they've obviously brought back or remastered, and they didn't change the name. So that, I guess that makes sense given the outside Call of Duty news and whatnot. But in terms of the actual map and its return to competitive Call of Duty, I am super excited for it. I was very vocal when it was leaked before Black Ops 7 was even out, and you can go back and check in the episodes. I thought Yemen would be a map that could work very well in this game in particular, because I was thinking it felt like a bigger map at the time in Black Ops 2. Now with the advanced movement, it wasn't like a huge map to the point where it would still feel like a big map with the advanced movement. I feel like with the movement in Black Ops 7, it's a like it's a bigger medium-sized map, if that makes sense to anybody. And I feel like it could work well, if the spawns and everything check out. But we've already seen a reluctance from the pros to
Yep.
try out maps and stuff after Major 1. I'm hopeful that after Major 2, we got a little bit longer of a break. I think we were talking about it last show, after the show last week, that it was like, it's like a 2-week break or 2.5-week break after Major 2. So maybe in that time frame we'll be able to get like Fringe, maybe even one of the Season 1 maps, or Yemen or Clifftown. That's going to be an issue for me if it is involved. But I'm not holding my breath. But I am hopeful that it could potentially be a solid map for the end of the 2026 CDL season. I do think like Grind and Firing Range, in my eyes at least, they are smaller or small medium sized maps from previous games that just play super fast or would be expected to play super fast with the advanced movement. I got that same sort of vibe from Standoff in the sense of obviously iconic Call of Duty map, but it's not the biggest map in the world. And with the sliding and the quicker pace of the game compared to when that map was in its heyday, um, it plays differently, and that could be an issue. So I think that's part of like why Standoff potentially might not be involved in the CDL, but for the same uh, similar mindset with Clifftown here, I think it's a bigger map that, due to the movement, could play in line with some of these other maps that are, effective in today's CDL era. There are also two other 6v6 maps, I believe, coming with the update today, which should be live now at time of recording. So there, at the very least, there are some options that could breathe some a breath of fresh air into the map pool after Major 2. It's just going to be a question of whether it actually happens or not.
Yeah, it does need to happen, but the whether that actually means it will is just a completely different question. I like we can't go another 3 months or whatever it is with Den and Colossus, and it's just like, all right, dude, like I know, but like let's move on and let's get some new maps in the map pool. Let's freshen some things up, and they could do it again before the Major 3 qualifiers as well. They're because in Major 3, the Major 3 section, you're gonna have the Major 3 qualifiers. I think we said it was like 1 week of qualifiers,
Yep.
and then the minor, and then they finish up with like another few weeks of qualifiers, and then Major 3. And I think it's a similar schedule for the Major 4 set of the schedule, and then you get that 2 or 3 week break, and then champs at the end of the season. So I hope that there is some kind of variety coming in this back half of the season, especially because we're coming off of 11 online qualifier matches where a lot of Den, for example, is being played. And not saying that Den needs to be taken out of the rotation necessarily. I don't necessarily think that's what has to happen, but that would be something to really liven it up, is like the map that everybody plays. Yeah, we're going to take that out, and we're going to see how teams react to it over the back half of the season. And then maybe put it in before Major 4 or put it in before champs. I think that would be fairly interesting. I don't know how the teams would really do with that, and a major meta change or major map pool change, between Major 4 and champs. But it could be interesting regardless.
I think it was last year with Hacienda was last year, right? I'm not like,
Yeah, I believe so.
I don't know why I'm like having a brain fart right now, but um they like showed the votes or whatever. Maybe it wasn't that. Maybe it was the map with all the cars that blew up when that one got when dealership got added last year. Um I think it was like Breaking Point like showed the number of vetoes, and that's what was ended up being used to calculate what map was
Oh yeah.
removed. Was like, okay, this map isn't being played or at all, and it's being vetoed by a lot of teams, so we're going to get rid of that and bring in an option that seemingly, at least in theory, replaces the option that wasn't even being utilized. So that's more likely than them getting rid of a map that's basically being played a lot. But I do think we've heard uh, in recent times that the theory right now is the CDL does not like when a 3-game series is
Yeah.
played on all 3 maps during that. Like, obviously, there's a reason that some of these maps are available for all 3 modes, because they most likely end up being the most balanced or
Mm-hmm.
competitively fair maps. But allegedly, reportedly, whatever, the CDL might not be a huge fan when you get like a Scar or a Den series. They want to see some variety. So it'll be interesting to see if anything happens with the map pool.
JJ Wody said pros just don't want to learn a new map, which is understandable but still whack as fuck. He said it would be ideal if they swap 2 to 3 maps every major. I bet we see more upsets, which would be great. I certainly agree. I think swapping out Den is actually what the CDL should do when they feel like they need to liven things up, and like you know if let's say Blackheart, I would assume that Blackheart is the least picked hardpoint map of any this season, even if you take into account like from January on when it was in
Yeah.
the map pool with everything else. I would assume that's the least picked of any of the maps, and probably the most vetoed as well. What I would do is, okay, what is the most played? But probably Den. Okay, Den's gone. You're gonna have to figure it out on Blackheart. We're gonna add a new map as well, but Blackheart is going to be something that you're actually more familiar with than some of this other, some of these other maps. Say it's Clifftown or if it's Fringe or whatever, which haven't been played competitively this year, and it's going to force teams to get better at those maps. I mean, CS:GO has long had this idea, like they take out very popular maps and very good maps to, a lot of times to rework them, but also to give these new maps some kind of run and allow teams to get used to those maps, and really just give the viewer something different than what they've been getting. Like, because I will say Den 3 times in a row is like, all right, like this is a little weird. This is really repetitive, because you could have multiple series in a row that also are just 95% Den, for example. So I definitely agree with the idea that JJ Wody has of just maybe swap, like obviously more maps that are able to be put into competitive map pool. That's always been my thing, is like the more maps that you have, I think they should all be in the rotation personally. And then the vetoes get a lot more interesting, because when you only have like, really 5 maps for hardpoint, I mean, there's only so many options there. But if you had 10 maps for hardpoint, man, your vetoes get really, really important. And I feel like that would actually increase the skill gap in the CDL as well.
Yeah, just to play devil's advocate, because obviously I agree that map pool changes are important and should happen. I think having them happen like after every major, or multiple map changes after every major, would just be an issue, in the sense of there's only X number of maps that are
Mm-hmm.
even like deemed competitively viable. I get what you're saying, like just let them all in there, and then the vetoes become important. But even if you do that, there inevitably would be some maps that just aren't ever played, even if they
Mm-hmm.
aren't vetoed or whatever. But um, I think the other issue in terms of these new maps in particular is when there are like spawn issues and stuff, it takes so long
Yep.
for the devs to address them, and then you have to factor in like the CDL patch that they're playing the qualifiers on might be a patch behind some of these patches where map fixes are addressed or anything like that. So there is a lot that has to go into making sure these maps are actually ready to be used
Mm-hmm.
at the CDL level, and that just goes back to our years long conversation of not having proper developer support for competitive Call of Duty and everything like that. So we're not going to have to get into that today, but I do think it is, as much as I personally do want to see some of these other maps and stuff, I definitely understand that there are some stuff behind the scenes that prevent it from being as easy as, oh yeah, just get rid of this map and throw in this other map. And I do agree, especially this year, that it seems like the pros have been a little on the lazy side in terms of being willing to try some of these maps. But at the end of the day, there's going to be some issues no matter what you try and do. I just hope, I'm hopeful that for the rest of this season, uh, I completely butchered that. I'm hopeful that we get some changes after Major 2, so that the back half of this season, we just have some new life in it.
Yeah, I think the major issue is that it isn't just the maps. If it were, if they were able to be diverse in the guns, in the meta, and maybe even the perks that they use, or however, like whatever you want to say, like if everything else was diverse and they were able to adapt, or willing to adapt, I should say, then that would be one thing. But we've also seen that the guns are, we have 2 guns. There are 2 guns that get used. There was one gun that got used for a week or 2, and then people were like, nope, we're going to keep using our 2 guns. Even when they got nerfed, and we're still going to use those 2 guns. Because we learned those in November. We don't want to relearn any kind of gun in March. And to me, that's an issue that the CDL can 100% just fix by saying it's banned. Good luck. Like, And obviously that's a crazy thing to think about, but that is exactly what every other esport does. Every other esport is like, yeah, this isn't available and competitive, or we're just going to nerf it. Like the developers will say, we're going to nerf it into the ground where it's shooting, you're going to have to put 8 bullets in someone to get that kill. So good luck. That's going to be what we're going with. But yeah, that's not the case, because everybody is okay with the status quo, including the developers, even if they probably don't like it or whatever, but they don't do anything radical enough to actually change it. JJ Wody said they're pros, they should act like it and adapt. They always say ranked isn't close to pros, then pros should be godlike at adapting, but they know they can lose their spot. I mean, that's really the name of the game, is that if everybody plays on the same meta, the same maps, and the same format for 8 straight months, then it should be kind of a linear line, you would think, just by like whoever's good, whoever's the best at the beginning of the game should be the best at the end of the game. We know that's not the case, but I do think that if you introduce some variables in the season, it does challenge the players, maybe more than they want to be challenged. But at this point, like, who really gives a fuck? Like, you gotta spice some things up, especially again, I'll say it, like after these qualifiers in particular, where we've seen 11 straight online matches and then a major. And, we haven't gotten any map changes this season other than Blackheart being taken out of the rotation due to the bug at the beginning of the season. Yeah. Everything else has been the same guns that have been used since November. Things have to change in some fashion, and I feel like this is the perfect time in the next few weeks, or after obviously Major 2, to do that and to really liven things up. So hopefully we get that. I'm not super optimistic. I don't think you are either, but it is something that we'll keep an eye on. Next up, we had you posted in the notes. It's Easy Mac. He went through the top 5 most clutch players this season by clutch wins. And so he came to, so I'll go 5 to 1. 5 was Mamba, which I was not really expecting. He had 5 clutches won. 2 of them were 1v1s. Abuza's number 4, Neptune number 3, Mercules number 2, and then number 1 was Rancor, which is just a crazy thing to think about. He has 5 1v1 wins, so he's 5 out of 6, which is a crazy number. And he's also won 3 of 9 1v2s, which is, I mean, that's pretty good. What did you think about these numbers?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as a the S&D kid, I really thought this was a cool post and was something cool to like actually see the stats behind. I think that the biggest thing, like, I wasn't surprised at all to see Neptune's name on here, especially given his clutches at Major 1, and especially at the expensive phase there in the losers bracket finals. But I do think, you just look at it, like 1v2s, Mamba is 2 of 12, Abuza 2 for 13, Neptune 3 for 8. 3 for 8 is pretty good. Rancor 3 for 9. That's pretty good too. Mercules 5 for 11. Literally almost 50% of his 1v2s are just automatic dubs for him. Like that's MVP Merc form right there. That's pretty crazy to see. But I wasn't necessarily surprised to see Rancor at the top. I mean, I feel like we've talked about Miami and their search and destroy multiple times this year, and he's obviously a bit of a slower AR player, I guess, in a sense. Maybe I wasn't thinking necessarily Rancor, but someone on Miami, like maybe Super, but Super has been sniping a lot, so that makes, the clutches maybe a little tougher unless he picks up a gun and is able to like flick onto someone, then switch to a gun or something like that. But shout out Rancor, shout out reigning rookie of the year, played really well with Miami squad in that search. Resurgence towards the end of last year, and it's seemingly picking back up to where they're a pretty strong search team again. And I thought it was just a cool stat.
I mean, I think it also, in this list, you kind of get a sense of how some of these players play or their teams play in S&D. Because if you look at Abuza, he's been in 18 either 1v3 or 1v4 situations. Mamba's been in 9. Neptune 11, Mercury 6. That's a crazy number for. I mean, granted, he's a fast SMG player, so he's probably not going to be in it. But like, and then you have Rancor, who's also an AR, has only been an 11. So like, something's going on with Abuza and FaZe. Like, he's playing either too slow, the team's playing too fast. Like, for that many times to be in a 1v3 or 1v4 is kind of nuts. He's also been in 13 1v2s this season, which is the most of anybody on this list. So, I think that's pretty interesting. But like you said, Mercury's winning 5 of his 11 1v2s is wild.
Abuz has been the sniper for the majority of FaZe's reps, so like there could just be rounds where literally everyone else is dying on FaZe, and then he's just like in a house or something with the sniper, and like, well, shit, here we go again.
Yeah. Interestingly, nobody has 2 1v3 or 1v4s. Because Mama's got 1 1v3, Neptune has a 1v3, Merc has a 1v3, and then Rincor doesn't have any. His are all 1v1 and 1v2s.
I thought Neptune had 2 1v3s in the losers finals against FaZe, but maybe it's like one of them actually was a 1v2, because technically, because Easy Max definition was that, well, no, because it says player must be alive in a 1vx for 5+ seconds, but there was definitely, I mean, there was one where it was almost a 1v4, and I think it was a 1v3. I just remember he went crazy in that losers finals against FaZe at Major 1. But either way, this was just a fun stat that, the S&D nerd in me particularly wanted to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and I mean, it's something to bring up later in the season when they're in those big moments, and you can be like, well, we know that they're clutch.
That's really the only time I feel like we've ever had this actual number to talk about, was during NYSL's champs winning run at MW2. The broadcast just kept on mentioning how Skies had like a 80%, or I might have butchered that number, but they had the number for Skies in 1v1 situations during the MW2 season, and it was like ridiculous number. And I really like that, and that like illustrated to me like not only is Skies consistently in these clutch situations for New York, he's actually, making them, capitalizing on them, and turning them into round wins consistently. So I thought that was really cool, and I feel like it's just something that we don't hear a ton about like regularly. Like, we're getting this blurb now. Who knows if we get like the updated numbers? Obviously, I trust Easy Mac, and he I wouldn't be surprised if he keeps us updated now. But it's something I would definitely be very interested in for the rest of the season and the rest of the CDL in perpetuity.
Yeah, I think it would be great if the CDL kept track of a lot of these things to make it easier, because if you look on like the NBA or NFL, like even the league itself is keeping a lot of that data and like putting it out, and so people actually can see it and follow along with it. Whereas the CDL, like, I think they once upon a time had like a stats board.
I think Easy Mac does it for the broadcast now.
Yeah, so like he's been doing it for the love of the game for a long time.
Yeah.
And he even does the challenger stuff. I always see him crashing out when challengers players leave the lobbies and screw up his stats. So he's, shout out to him. He's been doing it a really long time, and been doing kind of a service, like a major service to the COD community as a whole. So shout out to him. Next up, we'll just stick with the Breaking Point stuff, because they put out their power rankings, their power ranking updates, which I thought was pretty interesting. Like, this is a very pretty bizarre time to update your power ranking, but probably the best time to do it, because it shows how awful the league has been over the last few weeks. Because the preseason, they put their preseason and current power rankings right next to each other, and OpTic is the S team in both of those power rankings. But everything else has pretty much changed since then. In the preseason, you had the Paris Gentlemates, they're A+, LAT A-. Then you have FaZe, Toronto, G2, all in the B tier. Miami and Boston, the C tier. C9, C-, which was a crazy thing. Riyadh Falcons, Carolina, both D, and then Vancouver at the very bottom, D-. And now, again, OpTic stays at the S, but then you have 5 teams in that B tier, no A tier, no A plus, A minus, nothing. LAT, Toronto, Minnesota, Miami, and Falcons, all B tier. FaZe and Paris, 2 teams that were probably world championship contenders or considered to be at the beginning of the season. They are both C plus tier, then Carolina C minus, Boston D plus, Vancouver D plus, and then C9 of course has an F. I would assume that our tiers will look relatively similar once we do them post Major 2. Granted, we don't do the actual S tiers as much, and it always kind of changes. But how do you feel Breaking Point's current power rankings are in relation to maybe how you kind of feel about the CDL at this current moment?
Well, I just brought it up because it was one of the things I saw on Twitter, and we kind of mentioned it last episode in the sense of like saying if we were doing our power rankings right now, it would be OpTic at the top, then potentially one tier with 10 teams in the middle, and then Cloud9 by themselves. And obviously, that's not necessarily how Breaking Point updated it, but it's pretty close. And I just thought the most noteworthy thing for them in here was that they didn't put a single team in the A tier, so they are basically saying there's an entire tier between OpTic and the next closest team, which I think just goes to illustrate how dominant OpTic have been recently, and in correlation to that, how much everybody else has struggled, or just, you know, everybody not named OpTic has seemingly been super close in comparison to each other, and then it's just everybody fighting, and OpTic's just that much far ahead of everybody else at this point in the season, which is, you know, I feel like there have been instances in past CDL seasons where we've seen like a very clear number 1 team at different points in the season, and I can't, you know, it would be interesting to go back and look to compare if this OpTic team is so much more further ahead than number 2 versus like Cold War FaZe or just any other team that's in first at this point in the season, what the difference would be to the next closest team to them. But, you know, without going back and examining the data like that, it's definitely, it feels like, at least in recent years, this is one of the early instances early on in the season where it's not like a multi-team race for number 1 at this exact moment.
Yeah, that's my biggest thing, is that it's just one team, and it's maybe only FaZe and Cold War is similar in that regard, where it did feel like a one-team race that they would have to lose it for anybody to actually win. And that feels pretty similar to what we're going through now with OpTic, even though we saw, I think we both had OpTic at the top of our power rankings to begin the season, and we probably kept them through the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season, and then they fell off a cliff. And then, you know, going into Major 1, we're kind of asking ourselves what we can even expect out of them. So that they're always something like that can always happen. You know, that's the OpTic experience. I think that's the CDL experience in a lot of ways. Just the very random nature of the league can kind of bite teams in the butt over a course of a season, of course. Let's just talk real quick, because it kind of fits in, you know, the standings fit in with the power rankings, because I think the power rankings probably are pretty closely related to the standings. But also Dr. Doug Lieb, you know, he was with the Gorillas, I think, as like a data analyst during, it might have been like season 1. It might have been that 2020 MW season.
It might, yeah.
But he, so it's at Doug Lieb on Twitter, and he posted his scenario breakdown of the CDL and the seeding probabilities going into this week of the CDL matches. And there were a few different versions of his breakdown. One was just like a 50-50, you know, like everybody has kind of like a 50-50 shot at winning their upcoming matches, and then the tiebreakers and all of that. And then another one was, he said, predicted chances based on team strength plus remaining schedule. And he said that it's likely that 4 wins will be enough to make it into Major 2, which is pretty crazy that you can go 4-7 and still be in the top 10 of the league. That feels pretty low to me, but I said that 5 wins certainly seemed like enough last week, and I think probably 4 wins might be enough this time. But the reason I bring it up is because I talked last episode about the Gentlemates and how them being on this losing streak and their remaining schedule in the Major 2 qualifiers puts them at like pretty great risk of actually not even making it to Major 2 after winning Major 1. And I would say that Doug's graphic kind of backs that up. If you look at the one that is based on team strength and remaining schedule, they have an 87% chance of making it to Major 2. But that is the third lowest chance of any team in the CDL, only above C9 New York, who he says has less than 1% chance of making it to Major 2 because I think they're 1-6, if I'm not mistaken, going in the last 2 weeks. And then Boston Breach, who are 3-5. So they certainly could, but they have a tough rest of their schedule. And he put them at a 26% chance to make it into Major 2. So again, Paris 87%, but that is lower than the Vancouver Surge. That is lower than the Carolina Royal Ravens, FaZe Vegas, and the top 6 teams who have a 99 or 100% chance to make it into the bracket. And then if you look at the one that isn't based on the schedule, FaZe Vegas has the second worst odds of actually making it in. He put them at a 69% chance. And C9, they're last at 26%. But again, that's not taking into account like who they actually play. It's just a 50-50 shot. It's just flipping a coin to see who would win those matches. I don't know if you had any thoughts about the likelihood of some of these teams actually missing out on Major 2.
I mean, we've talked about it enough. At least I have this year, and comparing it to the Vanguard year of the coin flipping nature of Black Ops 7 and sometimes. So that 50-50 graphic versus like who this guy expects to win some matches, the 50-50 one might be a better gauge of what could happen, just in the sense of like, there have been a lot of matches this season that have been super hard to predict because it feels like one team should clearly have an edge going in and then they just fall flat on their face and struggle. So especially in this qualifiers where literally we talked about like second place and 11th place are separated by 1 or 2 games, like feels like anything can happen over these next 2 weeks, and it's going to be really important for some of these teams to make sure they lock in, especially over these next 2 weeks, and especially FaZe and Gentlemates are 2 of the teams that it would just be super weird if one of them wasn't actually at Major 2, and it's definitely scary that it's even a possibility heading into the end of the qualifiers.
Yeah, JJ Woody said betting against mates until Major 2, they fell off a cliff as a team. I wouldn't blame anybody for betting against them. I mean, they're if their schedule was easier, if they had their schedule flipped where they're playing some of these like mid-tier to lower tier teams at the end of the qualifiers, and they had whatever they have, like a 3-4 record going into week 5, then I could be like, I mean, it'd be kind of crazy for them not to make it. But when they play, 3 of like the top 5 teams or top 6 teams, maybe not in terms of the standings, but actual like who we think could actually win Major 2, I think then you can start to doubt them a lot and think that they might not actually even make it to Major 2. The standings as they are right now, and that'll help kind of set the stage for our predictions as we do them. So OpTic is 8-0, 24-5 map count in these qualifiers, 83% map win percentage. No other team has higher than a 61 map win percentage, and that is LAT. LAT is one of 4 teams that is 4-3. LAT Falcons, Miami Heretics, and G2 Minnesota are all 4-3, tied for second place. Going into week 5, Toronto is 4-4, standing at 6th place alone. And then you have Paris, Carolina, Vancouver. Those 3 teams are tied for 7th currently, all at 3-4, which is a crazy group of teams to have all next to each other. Then FaZe Vegas and Boston are tied for 10th place at 3-5. and I believe because of the tiebreaker, that wouldn't Boston get in over FaZe? Did Boston not beat FaZe in these qualifiers?
It did,
So
but it would
currently,
be
wouldn't it be head to head?
well, yeah,
Is like, yeah, obviously technically because all these teams are on 3 wins, but I don't know. I would say Boston would have like a half, or they would be half a game back. FaZe and Boston would be half a game back in traditional sports because they've played one more game but lost one more. But if they tied just the two of them, FaZe and Boston, Boston would get in over FaZe because of the head-to-head tiebreaker, which is not ideal for the FaZe boys. And then 12th
nope,
place is C9. They are 1-6. They have a 6-20 map count. Of course, 3 of those map wins are against the Paris Gentlemen, so that's always
yep.
good to remember. Yeah, so that's the standings as we are right now on March 11th. I'll answer JJ Wodey's question real quick. He said, "Do you guys think they should play every team once every split?" I really like it, to be honest. Bink has he's talked about it before, but that is like I would say that's like the most fair way of doing things because you can get a really lopsided schedule otherwise, as you see in these major 3 and major 4 qualifiers. I am I'm not a huge fan of like week to week matches in general. I think it was a good experiment, trying to bridge the gap between esports and traditional sports, but I don't know if it actually works, particularly for competitive Call of Duty. I think for like League of Legends, and maybe Bink can answer this more accurately, it might work on a better stage because those matches are longer and like there's definitely, you're not going to get like a scrub team beating like a really great team as often in League of Legends as you do COD, and I think that can throw off um, some of the competitive integrity, which I've said I don't really care about all that much, but I like maybe a tournament format. I think going back to more tournaments and more bracket style events, even online, in a way to accrue CDL points. I think that could be a way to entice people. I don't know if that'll do it, but I do have a hard time following week to week when it's just singular matches versus like something, building towards something. What do you think, Bing?
Yeah, I mean, I've been well. First off, do I sound okay?
Yeah, you sound fine.
All right, and my Discord, like the video connected thing, is yellow instead of green, but it's 5 yellow bars instead of 5 green bars, so I don't know what's going on. Um, but anyway, yeah, I've been vocal about being a big fan of the every team plays every other team in these qualifiers. I do think it's dragged on a little bit in these qualifiers, and that could in part just be due to some of these matchups and like how like it's been a little coin flippy in nature and how some teams are um you know getting upset or just I don't know. I think it's been good though to see everybody play each other, and I think that's part of why we see so many teams with a close record so far, because there isn't like people we've talked about it in previous years, like Seattle farming LAG Bucks or whatever the saying used to be
Mm-hmm.
in the initial CDL years. Like, you don't have that luxury when you have to play everybody. Then everybody could technically have that opportunity to beat up on the lower teams and stuff. So I like it. In terms of a league comparison, it's a little tough because you have the draft component of
Yeah.
the series, and then every series is either a best of 3 or a best of 5, so it's a little different to do it. But I mean, they play everybody, all these other teams. For the most part, they play each other twice now, I think, in 2 best of 3s for each split of the regular season. Um, so I think it's hard to compare it to league, but end of the day, I do think potentially with the minor tournaments coming up in these next 2 qualifiers for Major 3 and Major 4, we were both pretty big fans of that last year, and I think I forgot about it totally until we were talking about it after the show last week, and that could maybe reinvigorate the debate of like getting the online tournament format flowing into these qualifiers versus the week to week matches and stuff. But I think that might be a little more wishful thinking. I think the CDL seems pretty set on this current format for qualifiers, at least.
Yeah, I don't know how much experimentation they want to do with the week to week format because they probably feel as if they have to fill like a certain quota of hours per week, and the way you do that is by having 4 matches a day or 3 matches a day for 3 days a week, stuff like that. But I think just in terms of like viewership, like it's hard because even traditional sports is struggling with this as well. Like the NFL is the only one that doesn't really struggle with it, and that's because one, a lot of it is based on the rivalries and like being within the division that you play. Almost, a little more than third of your schedule against teams within your division, so usually rivals, which isn't really a thing in esports nearly as much. Like rivals don't have as much history, so they're not as important and as like exciting typically. And also, the NFL is just like the scarcity is what makes it so entertaining for a lot of people, that they're really only like, obviously they do games on Thursday and they do games on Monday, but for the vast majority of fans, Sunday is the day that you tune in to watch matches. Whereas the CDL, you can tune in any time. Like you could tune in Friday or Sunday, Saturday, sometimes Thursday if there's a major. And I think that hurts it. Like the NBA is struggling with this. I've never followed MLB for a reason, and I don't have the brain capacity to follow any team for 162 games, even if they are playing it in a series. But that's a good example, is like they play all of their games in a series, and there are a lot of games, and you could go on a 5-game losing streak and it might not matter one bit by the end of the season. Whereas if you go on a 5-game losing streak in the NFL, your season might be over like that week. So yeah, it's a tough thing. I would like to just see them acknowledge or just kind of throw things out there. But we've kind of had the same system more or less since like the beginning of the MLG Pro League, right? Like they did try the pods in IW, where they had different teams on land doing these group matches, and they didn't have a lot of connection until the playoffs, which I didn't like. I mean, I attended them personally. I was like literally the only person there, and I wasn't a huge fan. So I don't know if fans really liked it watching it at home. But I don't think that there's a perfect solution for any of this.
Yeah.
Going into the 5th week of matches of the Major 2 qualifiers, starting on Friday, March 13th, we have Toronto versus C9. I don't know if you can really pick the last place team, even if they did just win against Paris not too long ago. So I will go with the Toronto Koi.
Yeah, I got to go with Toronto here.
Next up, we have Falcons versus Miami, which is a pretty interesting match. Miami coming in off of a pretty big win. Falcons have looked up and down throughout this entire season, I would say. They, of course, finished the Major 1 qualifiers on a 5-match win streak, did not have a great Major 1, and have shown flashes in the Major 2 qualifiers. I trust the Falcons more, so I'm going to go with the Falcons. I said it on the last episode that Miami, until last week, had not beaten who I would consider to be like a good, competent team. Although you could say that these teams are not good or competent anymore, but I need to see a little bit more from the Heretics to truly believe that they turned a corner on the season, so I'll go with the Falcons for that reason.
Yeah, I'm going with Miami. I think this was one of those matches that I was not 100% confident in heading into this week for our pick'em's sake. I wasn't sure who I wanted to go with, and I wasn't sure who you were going to go with, but I think I want to make sure we got some differences. So I'm going to go with Miami here. We're hyping up Rancor a little bit earlier in the show. I've been talking about their S&D for a while now, and especially in recent weeks. So I'll take Miami here, but I definitely do see this as a series that could go either way. And given their place in the standings, this could be one that determines who gets a higher seed. Obviously, since both are at 4 wins.
This next match on Friday, the final match, is critical to one team's seeding and then almost irrelevant to the other team's seeding. We have Gentlemates versus OpTic. We talked about it earlier in the show. OpTic is number 1 seed almost certainly. They would have to really just lose out. The second place teams would have to win out. It just seems very, very unlikely that they won't be the number 1 seed. And they've even said that they're going to experiment with different maps and try to kind of increase and better their map pool going into Major 2 as a result. On the opposite side, the Paris Gentlemen literally need to win at least one of these matches over the next few weeks, or they will not make it to Major 2. And this is not a good match to have when you're in that position whatsoever, even if OpTic is kind of weakening themselves by playing different maps. I will go with OpTic. Paris has shown no reason to pick them whatsoever, and OpTic is OpTic.
Yeah, I gotta go with OpTic here, but I mean, it's kind of interesting that we're hearing about the OpTic testing maps out right before they play Gentlemates. It kind of, in a sense, could be a little bit of a double-edged sword that, like, in a world where Gentlemates come out on fire because they know they have to come out on fire and they beat OpTic again, OpTic can just be like, oh, we were testing maps, no big deal. But if this OpTic team loses to this Gentlemates team the way both teams have been playing heading into this match, I don't know what I would think. I would officially be like, I have no idea what is going on in Black Ops 7 anymore. We've obviously seen Gentlemates beat OpTic this year, both in the preseason and at Major 1. So it's not like it's impossible, but just like I said, given the way both teams have played of late, this would be a major upset. I think it's safe to, I think it's fair to categorize it as an upset if it were to happen this time.
Yeah, I think it would be so funny. It will never happen, but I think it'd be really funny if OpTic was just trolling this entire time and they come out and they say, hey, we're going to tone it down a little bit, spread out the map pool, we're going to pick Blackheart Hardpoint or whatever, and then they just hammer comfort picks this entire series and just steamroll Paris. And it's like, all right, we were just messing around. Like, we actually want to win these matches too. Yeah, again, not going to happen, but Saturday, March 14th, Carolina versus G2, first up. I'll go with G2. They've shown like more recently, but they are also pretty inconsistent, as is Carolina. I guess you could say that literally about all of these matches, but I've just seen a little bit more over the last like 4 weeks from G2 that I feel more comfortable about.
Yeah, I mean, I've already said I'm out on Carolina, so I got to go with G2 here. I definitely do think this is a match that could go either way, just given what we've seen from both teams. Like, it feels like you said, some weeks one of these teams is on fire, and other times they look like they can't even hang. So it's going to be interesting. Could be a case of who shows up for this match, especially first match on a Saturday. But I'll take G2.
Toronto versus Vancouver. Very interesting to see if the Surge are able to keep that momentum that they built last week in Capsto's first week. Toronto, I'm sure they're trying to get back to where they were just a few weeks ago. We'll see if Vancouver actually does what they're supposed to do and gets them out of their comfort zone. I don't know if that will be the case or if they will kind of follow the Boston Breaches lead on that matter, but I will go Toronto regardless.
Yeah, I'm picking Toronto too. Very pivotal week for Toronto in the sense that they got 2 matches and they're playing C9 in Vancouver, and we're both picking them to go 2-0. There was a time just a couple weeks ago where I went on a pretty big rant about Toronto looking like a team that might not even be at Major 2, and then they obviously make the roster change, and I've been vocal about being impressed by what I've seen from Kip so far. So I think this is a big week for Toronto in the sense that you do not want to let some matches that should be winnable on paper slip through your fingers. Like, you got to capitalize on this opportunity towards the end of the qualifiers and cement your spot for Major 2.
Next up is LAT versus C9. That's exactly one of these matches for the Thieves that they've lost some pretty tough ones against good teams. Now they have an opportunity to just kind of farm a win, and they have a pretty good shot to get the number 2 seed if they win out. So that's certainly something that they can look forward to, but they certainly should win this.
Yeah, gotta go LAT.
Next up is Gentlemates versus Boston. I've said this multiple times that this is like the most important match for Paris for the rest of these qualifiers, because if they lose this match, then kind of all bets are off. I do think that, like, if they lose this match and they beat OpTic, I will have a lot of questions about what's going on. But I believe, like, if they lose this match, this shows that their problems run much, much deeper over a long period of time now than they should as the reigning Major 1 champions. And more importantly, they have matches against, like, FaZe, LAT, and OpTic the rest of the way. You have to beat Boston in that to even really have a shot to get to Major 2. And if they lose, then I do think that I think they probably won't make it if they lose this match. I will go with Paris. I think they should win. Like, there's no way of going around that. But Boston has been able to pull off many of these wins over the years, and Paris has looked worse than any top team that I can remember, and at least since OpTic last year.
This was the other match for me outside of Falcons Miami where I was, I didn't have my pick locked in before the show. I really, like, if this was basically almost any other team besides Cloud9 or Boston, I think I'm picking them to beat Gentlemates, just given the way Gentlemates have played of late. But I can't pick Boston here. I definitely, like I said, the way Gentlemates could play, I could realistically see Boston winning the series, and I think a lot of people could too. But I think, like you said, I think it's been well documented and it's pretty clear at this point that this is absolutely a must-win match for Gentlemates if they want to be at Major 2, and I think they aren't going to be ignorant to that fact, and they should come out and take care of business. But like I said, like you said, it hasn't been that simple for Gentlemates in these qualifiers, so I guess this could be a match that heading into this cycle, you probably just wrote off as a quick 3-0 for Gentlemates, but now this is must-watch match to end for Saturday.
Yeah, it's one of those matches where, like, in theory, Paris doesn't need to win it. They could win any of these next 4 and probably make it to Major 2. But this is like in a usual sense, if we saw this last split or whatever, then it'd be like a 95% chance that Paris is going to win this match. Like, we would give no opportunity to Boston. And now I think it's a lot closer to a 50-50 and maybe even greater odds for Boston, just because Paris just lost to C9. Like, C9 is worse than Boston, and like, the Breach have been able to beat good teams, like, regardless of whether they're performing well or not. They do play kind of weird, and you don't really know what to expect on a week-to-week basis. And I think that should be pretty frightening for Paris. Like, not going to Major 2 is a disappointment for anybody, considering you just have to finish in the top 10. But as, like, the European team, then that's a huge failure. And they could be kind of a sign of a roster change to come if they do end up losing this match. Sunday, March 15th, starting off with G2 versus Boston. There's no hesitation there. I will go with G2 Minnesota.
Yeah.
Vancouver versus Miami. Same kind of deal. Like, it's a little more interesting if Vancouver is able to beat Toronto earlier in the week. But even then, I can't pick the Surge until they've actually shown me on a consistent basis that they can beat these teams. So I'll go with the Heretics.
Yeah, I mean, Vancouver had a good showing last week in their first week with Capsule, but we've been tricked already this year by a bit of a honeymoon phase with Carolina. At least, you could argue whether we've been tricked or not, but I would say we have been. But I do think this could be an interesting matchup going, not to sound like a broken record, but talking about search and destroy with Miami. For this Surge team, just given that past chemistry between Capsule and TJ, as well as TJ and Gwyn, and the search and destroy that you expect from some of those players, this could be a series that comes down to the search. And if this new Vancouver team is able to catch Miami off guard, maybe because, like, they don't have bot or whatever to watch with Capsule in the lineup, that could be an edge for Vancouver, but I will be taking Miami here.
Next up, Falcons versus LAT. You said in the pre-show that Falcons had a really interesting week of matches, and it's really hard to argue that. They play against the Heretics and LAT, both teams that they realistically can beat. But it's, it's also realistic that they go 0-2 this week, and it's another disappointing week for the Falcons. I'm going to go with LAT, but I don't think that this is, like a super confident pick by. I don't know if you can really have that much confidence in LAT to beat a team like Falcons in general. But I just can't pick the Falcons at this point.
I mean, I got to go with LAT too, but like last week I was mentioning it how, felt like Neum was having some of his best series to date so far in the CDL, and the all-star caliber players around him were the ones not stepping up. If that's the case in this match, and MVP Xnid comes out and is frying, I wouldn't be surprised if Falcons somehow pulled out a win here. But I will take LAT. But this could be a match that we're talking about more next week in terms of we both picked LAT and got it wrong, and somehow Falcons won. But it's one that I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, Falcons have won 4 of their last 5. Granted, 2 of those wins were against Carolina and Cloud9, so I don't know if that is like a great test, but they've also beaten FaZe and Toronto in that stretch, but then also lost a Game 5 to Minnesota, who is up and down as well. So, it's, again, not a very confident pick, but I think LAT will pull it out. They did play in the Major 1 qualifiers very early on in the season, and LAT won 3-1, so, there is some kind of precedent there, but that's a different LAT team and probably a different Falcons team considering the win streak they went on afterwards. Next up, in the last match of the weekend, is FaZe versus Carolina. I will go FaZe, but I mean, I've seen FaZe just blow a bunch of matches that we typically don't see them blow, and I certainly could see that coming here.
Yeah, I gotta pick FaZe, but it's even last week I picked FaZe to go 0-2. This is their only match this week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm picking FaZe to go 1-0, which means they'll probably go 0-1. I've just been on the complete wrong side of most of FaZe's matches this set of qualifiers, but I think, if things are starting to click for FaZe, they should be able to beat Carolina. If they struggle at all in this match, that will be another worrying sign for me for this current FaZe roster.
In the pick'em so far this season, you are 63-41. I am 66-38, and Trimmer is still winless. Please like, subscribe, follow the podcast feed wherever you're listening or watching on. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, as well as YouTube. I believe we're at like 290-ish or almost 290 subscribers on YouTube. Like you said on the last episode that we did, the live stream, I think we gained 4 or 5 subscribers in that hour and a half that we did the show. So that's always great to see. We always appreciate your guys' support. I think we had a comment on the last video or last stream or something, kind of showing support as well, which is always great. Love you guys so much. Please, if you can, follow us on Twitter at JBink with 2Ks, at Pres Byers, and the podcast Twitter's at Ego Chall Podcast. You can also, if you want to watch us live, we're typically live every Sunday and every Wednesday. Of course, as I said that, then the things will change this week. But usually every Sunday night, every Wednesday afternoon, we do the live shows. You can watch them live on YouTube, or you can watch them at twitch.tv/Ego Chall Podcast. If you follow there, you should be able to get like an email notification anytime that we go live. You can also subscribe to that Twitch channel as well if you would like to financially support us. You can also follow and subscribe to Bink on Twitch, twitch.tv/JBink with 2Ks. And again, typically we're on Sunday and Wednesday. That will change this week because I'll be out of town this weekend, so I won't be around for a weekend show. So we're going to do the Major 2 Week 5 qualifiers recap on Wednesday, and at the same time also look forward to the Week 6 matches as well and make our predictions there. Talk about any news that happens between now and then as well. So that one should be a big show. I don't even know how much time that one's going to go because we've been going an hour and a half on just random shows this year, which never used to happen. I think we're getting a little yappy in our old age, but Hopefully it's not going to be a 2-hour show. I don't necessarily want to be talking. I've lost my voice, or nearly lost my voice, a few times before, so don't want to have that happen next week. But yeah, we'll be back next Wednesday, March 18th, for a Wednesday afternoon live show, and then the podcast will be in your feed Thursday morning. I believe that does it for me. Bink, take it away.
Yep. Thank you guys as always for all support. Shout out JJ Wody in the YouTube chat, was here all show, chatting with the boys and asking some good questions, having good interaction. So shout out JJ for sticking by for the whole show, and appreciate anyone else who was stopping by, watching, and all that good stuff. And yeah, like Preston said, no weekend show this weekend, but should be a good show in roughly a week, most likely a week. When we'll be discussing all of the matches that happened over the weekend and getting you ready for the last week of the qualifiers for Major 2. And then right after that, we're headed to LAN, back on LAN, and got a different format, obviously, with the only 10 teams and the play-in segment and stuff. So it should be some good stuff to talk about coming up. Can't wait to break it all down with you guys. But yeah, thank you as always, and we'll see you on the next one. Remember to send the chow.